If there is anything the recent chapters have taught us, it's that Sukuna is much stronger than we initially thought. I mean, we always knew that Sukuna and Gojo would end up being the two power forces in Jujutsu Kaisen, and that when they fought it would be a huge clash like it was. But everything that Sukuna has done since he killed Gojo not only makes us think that he was much stronger than we thought, but it also makes us think that this strength that he has been showcasing is unbelievable. There has been Sukuna plot armor talks since Higuruma took away Sukuna's curse tool instead of his own curse technique back when Higuruma trapped Sukuna in his domain expansion. But even since those chapters, Sukuna's display of strength has been remarkable. Let's just look back at what happened after he got done fighting against Gojo. We see Sukuna complete the fight with Gojo, he reincarnates, and then he immediately fights against Kashimo. Keep in mind that by this point, Sukuna does not have access to reverse curse technique, and he also cannot use his domain expansion, as both of those things are burnt out from his fight with Satoru Gojo. He then goes on to beat Kashimo rather easily, then he fights against Yuji and Higuruma. It seems like Higuruma gives him a bit of a challenge, but in the end, Higuruma falls anyway. Then we see Yuta come onto the scene. Yuta actually traps Sukuna in a domain expansion, hits him with a few attacks like Cleave, and even ends up landing the Angel's Light technique on Sukuna for just a moment, but in the end, it doesn't deal that much damage to him. And we even see Maki come out of nowhere with her soul sword and stab Sukuna in the back. Remember, this sword is stated to ignore the hardness of anything and cut the soul directly. And after Maki stabs Sukuna in the back with the soul sword, he actually can't even treat this wound because it requires a special type of reverse curse technique where you target and heal the soul. So while Sukuna is trying to do this, he is also forcing his heart to beat so he can continue fighting Maki. Remember at the beginning of the story whenever Megami fought against Sukuna and Sukuna actually ripped his own heart out? Sukuna was able to keep the body alive by using curse energy in order to keep the blood flowing throughout it, and he is also doing the same thing here when fighting against Maki. So keep in mind, he's been stabbed in the back by the soul sword, he just got hit by the Angel's Curse technique inside Yuta's domain, he just got out of a fight against Kashimo and Higuruma, and now he has been stabbed in the back and is keeping his heart pumping by using curse energy. And even through all of this, during this fight with Maki, he defeats her in one single punch. Yes, Maki, a character who has been hyped up to be the level of Yuta and Hikari, fighting against Sukuna, was defeated in one single punch. It seemed like this fight between Sukuna and Maki would last long because they had been swapping hands in this chapter before the recent, but Sukuna didn't get completely locked in until this recent chapter where he praises Maki for her strength, he praises the fact that she was able to reach the level she did without curse energy, and as soon as he focuses in on the fight for the first time, he lands a Black Flash and takes her out in one punch. So now let's look at everybody who is left to fight against Sukuna. Right now, Yuta's cut in half, Kashimo's dead as well, Gojo died. We see that Hikari is actually fighting Arame, so maybe Hikari can come and help in the future. Yuji also is very heavily injured, Choso hasn't even joined the fight, and Ino just got kicked and coughed up blood. So the only person left is Kusakabe, and we see that Kusakabe joined in the fight at the end of the recent chapter. So out of everybody, all of these strong forces that we've had in Jujutsu Kaisen so far, only Kusakabe currently stands in front of Sukuna. So the question we have to ask is, does Sukuna have some sort of plot armor? Is he too overpowered? Did Gege make Sukuna too powerful when writing his character? And most importantly, does it even make sense that Sukuna is as powerful as he has been shown to be in the recent chapters? There is one thing that Sukuna has done so far that I think actually is pretty questionable when it comes to Gege's writing, and that is Sukuna's ability to block Maki's sword. We know that Maki's sword is stated to ignore the hardness of everything and cut the soul directly. This is what we saw Maki do whenever she stabbed Sukuna in the back, and the sword is stated to work like this in chapter 198. So why was Sukuna able to block the sword? Some people try to say that Sukuna was using slashes in order to catch the sword like he did when he was fighting against Yuta. But the thing is, he's not doing that here. We can see the sword clearly make contact with his forearms and he's doing a blocking pose. And as far as we know, we've never seen Sukuna send slashes out of his forearm. So in this page, Sukuna is blocking a sword that is stated to negate durability. So we have to come up with some sort of conclusion for how Sukuna was able to block the split soul katana. So let's look at option A. Maybe the sword actually does not negate durability. Even though it was stated to in the past, Gege maybe just wanted to change his mind on what he wanted the sword to do without providing a new statement about it, and that's why Sukuna was able to block the sword. Or let's look at option B, maybe Gege just forgot. Maybe he wanted to draw a cool panel of Sukuna blocking Maki's sword and forgot that the sword was supposed to negate durability. Or option C, and what I think probably is what happened, the translation that says that the sword negates durability was just a bad translation. But the problem with this is that the translation that says that the sword negates durability has come from multiple very reputable translators, and they all have come to the same conclusion that the translation that says the sword negates durability is the correct translation. So if it is true that this sword negates durability, then we possibly have a plot hole on our hands for Sukuna being able to block the sword. Now, moving on from the sword situation, does it make sense that Sukuna was able to defeat Maki in a single punch? And I honestly think that it makes complete sense. Although Sukuna has been technically fighting for his life this entire time since he started his fight against Gojo, we have not seen him in this state of mind that he had against Maki ever. He was so exhilarated to fight against Maki. He gave her so much props because she had a heavenly restriction and was as powerful as she was. Although Sukuna did take the fight with Gojo more seriously, this fight with Maki is something that the narrator said Sukuna had been waiting for. Sukuna was exhilarated to have this fight, and he even said that for the first time ever, he finally had a duty bestowed upon him. He thought that it was his duty to prove that Jujutsu was stronger than heavenly restrictions. Sukuna got so dialed in that he focused and landed a black flash. Sukuna has never been given a duty before. He's just been stronger than everybody. Nobody has been able to tell him to do something that he never wanted to do. But right here, right now, he felt like he had something that he must fulfill. He felt like he had been given an order from the Jujutsu gods to beat down somebody with a heavenly restriction. And we even see Maki state that before this black flash landed, Sukuna stopped healing himself with reverse curse technique. So I truly do believe that Sukuna put everything he had into this one punch. I genuinely don't believe that Sukuna planned on this fight lasting more than this punch. And because he had this mindset and he focused to the point where he landed the black flash, the fight ended. So I think that for the narrative reasons of Sukuna never being given a duty, combined with the fact that he is just as strong as he is, him ending this fight with the black flash does actually make perfect sense to me. And if we just look at everything that Sukuna has done so far, beating Gojo in itself was a huge accomplishment because Gojo was the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer. But even after defeating Gojo and being in a weakened state, he did all of the things that I mentioned earlier. There's actually a tell that sort of should have told us that Sukuna will be able to do everything that he's been doing since Gojo died. And that is the fact that Gojo didn't even force him to use his reincarnated form. We know that Sukuna held on to that form throughout the entire fight against Gojo. And even though Gojo did push Sukuna very hard and Sukuna gave him props, in the end, Gojo couldn't push Sukuna to use his reincarnated form, and that is why Gojo was disappointed when we saw him talking in the afterlife. And even after everything that has happened since the end of the Gojo fight, we still saw Arame say that Sukuna has yet to go all out. So I want you to keep this in mind. Everything that we've seen after the battle against Gojo, even though Sukuna was weakened and had all of these fights against these different high-level sorcerers, he has yet to go all out. Which means that even though there are questions right now of whether Sukuna has plot armor and if he's too overpowered, he still has not shown us the full extent of his power. And do you guys want to know the scariest part about all of this when it comes to the main cast? Now that Sukuna has landed this black flash, he's going to recover even quicker than he was before. We know that whenever Gojo landed black flashes towards the end of the fight with Sukuna, his RCT output came back and he was fully healing again, because when you land black flashes and you get in the zone, controlling curse energy just comes like second nature. Now that Sukuna has landed a black flash, he's probably going to recover faster now, and Sukuna recovering quickly is the last thing that the main cast needs. And honestly, I'm having trouble thinking of a way they can even stop him now that he's probably going to be healing even faster than before. It's like we knew that Sukuna would be super strong, almost unbelievably strong, but to this extent, I don't think anybody saw coming. Now, Sukuna recovering means one big problem for the main cast, and that is that he will now be able to use his domain expansion again once he recovers enough. And we also know that he hasn't used the fire arrow yet, and possibly other techniques that are hidden behind the open ability. Because we know that Although it is just a theory, it is a very credible theory that the open technique is actually just the ability to copy other techniques, and we haven't even seen Sukuna use this at all. The open technique has been a mystery ever since he used it against Jogo. The reason that people think that it may have something to do with copying is because we saw that he used the flames after he was sitting on the meteor fighting against Jogo, who in his own right uses flames. So a theory began to be constructed that Sukuna actually just copies curse techniques like Yuta does, but we know that in the fan book it says that flames are just a part of Sukuna's curse technique, so I don't think that he copied it from Jogo. But it doesn't rule out the possibility that this black box open does mean that he can use other curse techniques. I actually think it is pretty likely that Sukuna is harboring other techniques that he hasn't used yet. Remember when it was described that curse techniques are like a black box in the brain? And wow, would you look at the similarities? Sukuna has an ability where he opens a black box, and we know that curse techniques are described as being held in a box. So I don't think that flames are the only technique that Sukuna has access to, although it is possible. I do think that it is likely that in this box, Sukuna holds other techniques that he hasn't used yet, which is why even though we've seen Sukuna display a lot of power so far and a bunch of different abilities, he still hasn't used his black box ability, so he truly hasn't gone all out yet. Now, if you're still not convinced that Sukuna currently is just too overpowered, then maybe this will convince you. As I said a couple minutes ago, he will probably end up recovering his domain expansion again. And there is absolutely nobody in the series who can survive Sukuna's domain expansion, other than Gojo, and Gojo has already passed away. So the only chance that the main cast has against Sukuna's domain is maybe Hikari. And the reason I'm saying maybe Hikari is because we know that it's stated that his domain expansion is exceptionally strong in tug-of-war battles. So as funny as it sounds, the only person who even possibly has a chance to tie with Sukuna's domain expansion in a clash is Hikari, but even I don't think that will happen if the time comes. So with Sukuna's domain expansion, nobody in the series will be able to take the slashes, nobody in the series should be able to domain clash with him, and everybody remaining should just die to Sukuna. I don't see a way that anybody currently can even hold a candle to Sukuna, especially if he recovers like I think he will. I'm going to tell you maybe the only way I see Sukuna losing in the future, the only way to take down as much power as he has, and that is possibly a setup where Yuji lands a Black Flash Soul Punch on Sukuna. It almost sounds like a supernatural attack the way I said it, a Black Flash Soul Punch, but in reality, this is one of the few ways that Sukuna can even die at this point. You see, Yuji has always been lucky when it comes to landing Black Flashes, and we also know that Yuji can land attacks on the soul, but I'm not even sure honestly if a Black Flash Soul Punch from Yuji would even get half the job done on Sukuna. And although I want to say Yuta and Maki possibly could return to just try and defeat Sukuna, I don't even think that Gege would take that route when it comes to taking down Sukuna. I think that the act of defeating Sukuna is more reserved for Yuji, as Sukuna and Yuji have always hated each other, although most of the hate was one-sided where Sukuna was just disinterested in Yuji, but Yuji has just purely hated Sukuna as long as Sukuna has been inside him, because Sukuna has done nothing but just kill his friends and destroy innocent lives. So if Yuji were the one to take down Sukuna, I think that would be the most satisfying ending. And although there are other strong fighters left, like Hikari for example, I don't think Hikari will be the person to defeat Sukuna, but maybe, just maybe, he will be able to get Sukuna weak enough to where Yuji can complete the job. And although we know that Kusakabe is about to fight against Sukuna, I honestly don't like his odds that much. We know that Kusakabe is stated to be the strongest grade 1 sorcerer excluding the big 3 families, but I don't think that even a title like strongest grade 1 sorcerer would be enough to go up against Sukuna. Maybe he gets lucky and deals some amount of damage to Sukuna, but as I said earlier, Sukuna just landed a Black Flash. He's more dialed in than ever. He's now in the zone and will possibly be recovering faster. I just don't see how Kusakabe lasts more than half a chapter against Sukuna. So when it comes to the question of whether or not Sukuna has become overpowered, I honestly think he has, but I'm not saying this in a way where Gege has done bad writing or anything. I think that the writing for Sukuna is actually really good. I'm just saying that in comparison to the entire verse of Jujutsu Kaisen, I truly do think that Sukuna has broken the limits when it comes to strength. I don't think we'll ever see another sorcerer as powerful as Sukuna, and even though Gojo gave him a run for his money, even Gojo wasn't enough to push Sukuna to the brink of his power. So with everything that has happened so far, I do think that the answer to the question is Sukuna is 100% overpowered. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. And if you enjoyed, then I would really appreciate if you would leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post on different topics that you guys give me and the few that I come up with on my own. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.